Hello, and welcome to A Critical Dragon, where I talk about narrative in film, television, and in books. And today I am joined by my esteemed colleague and erstwhile nemesis, Dr. Philip Chase. Hello, Philip.
Hello, AP. It is a pleasure to be here. I am excited to chat with you about the finale of season two of Rings of Power.
D- Did did you remember to look up what the title was?
Of course, it's the episode eight.
It's
Uh,
the finale of season two. I'll look up the title later. Well,
okay,
is it like Shadow and Flame or something? Or
that sounds good to me. If that's not what it is, that's what it should be.
Um, so season five, what I was going to suggest we do is we sort of go through the major bits of this episode, and then
Okay,
maybe a very brief discussion of our overall impressions of season two, if that.
sounds like a blast.
Okay. So why don't we start with the sort of prologue section, which is
Yeah,
Durin and Diza, Durin and the Balrog.
sounds great. And really, the show stealer in the prologue, at least for me, was that visual of Durin Sr. making that final leap with axe in hand toward the Balrog. I mean, the visuals in this production have been stunning, just stunning, and that was I think a great example of this moment that they did lead up to really well with this character's journey in this
Mhm.
season. Durin Sr. I'm referring to and his kind of moment of redemption there for allowing his ring to get the better of him and pushing his him to from a king who genuinely cared about his people to a king who was so focused on the wealth that that became his obsession and the ring just nudged him in that direction in a way that was poisonous and to have that heart to heart with his son and have that one line where you were always, referring back to the conversation that they had had, or where he said, you were always getting stronger, that was great. That was really good dialogue there. And to have him go out that way, making his leap toward the Balrog, sacrificing so that he would perhaps delay it so that his son could get away and leaving behind the ring also I think interesting because knowing he knows how Durin his son feels about it but hopes perhaps that he'll pick it up, will he use it or not, that sort of thing. I think Durin is too smart or has perceived you know too easily how too readily how dangerous this ring is, so I don't think he'll be wearing it anytime soon. But yeah, that was a great scene.
Yeah, there are a couple of minor quibbles I have with it, but
Okay.
on the whole, I agree with you. I really, really like the scene, and I think there are some interesting things, different ways that we can interpret it. So the first thing I wanted to talk about, why don't we start with my quibbles because it's
Okay.
always fun to get the quibbles out of the way.
Yeah.
Um, that moment when he's leaping and he
Yeah.
has the axe, because he's wearing robes, it it does look a little bit silly.
Oh, you think? Okay. I loved
I,
it. I love the visual of it.
and it was kind of that, it was like a real computer game moment,
Uh-huh.
um, and it just looked a bit strange. But the thing is, like the Balrog itself, obviously very, very, very reminiscent of how they did the Balrog in the Peter Jackson version.
They deliberately had the whip go around his ankle, and I didn't need that reminder that this is a Balrog, but that's okay.
Um, but again, like a lot of the Peter Jackson version was based on what Bakshi had done
Uh-huh.
in the animated version. So
So fair is fair. Yeah.
if you're looking at predecessors, there's an evolution along them. One quibble is I Balrogs don't have wings.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
It is a metaphor in the text,
Yeah.
and yet everyone always gives the Balrog wings. Now,
Including backsheet version. Yeah.
to be fair, in this version, they are very much more shadow and smoke.
Yeah.
Um, which I am better with than them being the solid sort of wings that the Bakshi version had. But again, I dislike this. Balrogs don't have wings. Um, I told you it was a quibble.
That's a quibble. Yeah.
No, one of the things I think interesting about the second part of this that I have a minor issue with, because of the time compression,
Uh-huh.
we see they break into this section of the mountain, and we see all of the veins of Mithril, and you're
Yeah.
like, great, except the Balrog is already there, and
Right.
so they haven't actually mined that much Mithril. I honestly would have preferred that they'd already been mining Mithril earlier
Uh-huh. Yeah.
and in mining it and go, there's a massive vein, like, and they'd gotten a chunk of it out already. And then they go, oh, there's a massive vein here. And when they did that, that's the thing that led them to the Balrog because
Yeah. Yeah.
we need enough Mithril for a Mithril chain shirt to have been made for a young elf prince.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Um, and so just that because of that compression and doing all of this, and again, I think this goes back to that decision that the showrunners made about compression, which in trying to fit everything in the time frame has led to some things being shortened that I don't think should have been. And this would be one of them.
Yeah. No, that is a fair criticism. I can't argue with that.
But
But I do
that
like the culmination of Durin Senior's arc in this season. That
uh,
was
and
yeah,
and that's what I was about to move on to about
yeah,
Durin being taken over by the sickness, but then having the strength of will and character to finally remove the ring
yeah,
because he is confronted by his son. He is confronted by the Balrog being there, and it's like, whoops, this has led me the wrong way. And this emphasizes what Tolkien had said about the dwarves, that they were very hard to corrupt. So
yeah,
while this had increased the greed and uh, avariciousness, avarice
yeah.
of the dwarves, Tolkien also had this concept that no mortal was truly irredeemable.
Right.
That mortals, because they possessed these souls, could be redeemed. And we see that with a lot of the stories in the Lord of the Rings. This very Christian, almost specifically Catholic in a number of respects,
Sure.
idea about being redeemed, and it ties into the traditional tragic arc that we have, the heroic tragedy of this fatal flaw. Then we have a moment where it turns. There's the moment of revelation, and then
Hmm.
the price must be paid. It is too late to live on and correct it. And there's usually that very tragic moment where they realize where they have been wrong and what they did wrong.
Right.
And there's a moment of sacrifice. Very, very common in tragic storytelling. And so
Yeah.
I liked seeing that here. And in taking the ring off, because we'd had that conversation between the two of them about um Durin Jr. saying like, and you let me just get my hand up just enough, and then you would cry. And he was like, no, that was you getting stronger.
Yeah.
By taking the ring off, I think an interesting way to think about it is he believes that his son is stronger than him and therefore can command the ring.
Uh-huh.
Instead of letting the ring overtake him the way that he did, he thinks his son is going to be strong enough. By the way, if anyone hears me struggling to speak, I had some dentistry work done, and it is making talking a little bit more difficult than normal.
Well, so I thought that was from when Galadriel punched your face a few times.
Listen up, Sauron. Um, but I honestly think that Durin, in setting it aside, is leaving it open to his son, who he believes is stronger than him and
Yeah.
who will be a better dwarf, will be a better king.
Yeah.
And therefore, this is a power. And if his son can wield it, if his son can control it, then he wants to leave it for him.
Yeah.
But so that setting aside the ring, showing the strength of the dwarf, showing the strength of the character, the tragic sacrifice, I think that all played out really, really well. And
Good
again,
stuff.
it was incredibly cinematic. Like I
Yeah.
completely agree. And
Yeah.
the effects that they used for the Balrog, the sound design, how the fire whip looked, like
Yep.
all of that was really, really stunning. Like I was very impressed. And remember, this is a TV show. And yet that is on par with what you would expect from a blockbuster movie.
Absolutely. And the acting between father and son has been a real highlight of the season as well. I mean, this is another point where I feel I would like to commend the show. In addition to the visuals, the music, the acting has been fantastic. We've got some beautiful performances in this season and in this episode. This is one of them, and we're going to talk about it later. But the Celebrimbor Sauron stuff that's been going on, just top notch in my opinion. Real, just tragic Greek tragedy on the screen that we're seeing here. So yeah, brilliant stuff.
So why don't we move on to the stranger,
Okay.
Gandalf, and the hobbits, that story, because it's basically two major scenes. So we can deal with
I'm just relieved we don't have to say the stranger anymore. I can just say Gandalf now.
and one of the things I liked about it is for a start, when the blue wizard appears, whichever of the blue wizards he may turn out to be, but he
Yeah,
goes, Manwë promised you'd come, and there were five of us, so it's clear he is one of the Astari. I think Kieran Hines and the showrunner making him look like the vision of Saruman from the films is a very deliberate choice because the Astari are all kind of similar looking.
right.
Like they're not radically different. And I think it's a nice evocation of that, but I don't think in any way that they're trying to say that he is Saruman.
Right, I agree. But he is I also think that he is channeling uh Christopher Lee's performance
Yeah.
in the Peter Jackson films at moments where he has similar intonation and he has similar they're both fantastic actors, or Christopher Lee was. But yeah, I felt that you could kind of feel just little echoes of Saruman in the way he spoke and but I agree that he is not Saruman. Most likely, obviously, one of the two blue wizards. I don't know their names even. So
I
you're
keep forgetting.
wrong.
It's like
Yeah.
Alatar and Palandro or Palandro or
Okay.
yeah.
Palindrome.
Um and he refers to the five of them. So this is obviously the second time that the Astari were sent to Middle Earth. Because there
Uh-huh.
were six the first time.
Right.
Um but that's neither here nor there. Um again, this is a minor quibble I have with both the Peter Jackson films and this, and I think it has to do with what people expect from modern fantasy. I hate the magic in Tolkien being made into this spectacular, overt show of power and force.
Right.
So much of the magic in Tolkien is subtle
Mm.
and is not about these big showy special effects. And it was one thing that I loathed in Jackson's version was the wizard battle between Gandalf and Saruman. And
I know.
it was two old men throwing force blasts at each other. I'm like, what are you doing? It was undignified and it was silly and it was dumb. And but that's a personal opinion of mine. And
Okay.
with this, the vast spectacle of raising up all of the rock and destroying the mini pseudo Shire, and then
Shire
Gandalf
in the desert.
holding all the rocks up, and I'm like, why does magic in this have to be so over the top and melodramatic? And I think it's because modern audiences want that spectacle for a lot of
Right.
things. They
Right.
want to see magic like that. Personally, not my bag for this type of story.
Yeah.
But in other fantasy settings, I'd be much more okay with it. It's just I get a bit tired that that's what the magic is. I
Right.
don't think it needs to be that. What do you
Yeah.
think?
Well, one thing I want to comment on is that you got another thing correct, which was that you had predicted when Tom Bombadil gave Gandalf the choice, either you get your staff or you get your friend, but sorry, you can't do both, that this was a test. And indeed, Gandalf showed the correct instinct, which was to go after his friend. I am I'm probably in the minority in adoring the I can see the flaws in this thread throughout season 1 and 2, to be honest with you. But I really love the dynamic between the actor for Gandalf and the actor for Nori. And to me, I love the idea as well of showing us how Gandalf became a friend to the hobbits, and that he
Oh,
what he learned from them, the humanity of Gandalf, the humility that he displays, as opposed to a Saruman or this other blue wizard or whatever, is perhaps you could attribute it to his being involved with hobbits from an early point, and learning lessons from them, life lessons from them. I love that they tried their best to include that in this show. I feel like it's run its course now. And Nori, yeah, I know. I'm not sure that's the last we'll see of the hobbits. I think we'll probably see more of them as these stores get resettled, by being led by a Poppy back to where the Harfoots are, and maybe founding a Shire or something like that. We probably will see that. But I think that Gandalf is now on his own, and he's going to have to be pulled into the main narrative here. If you know, I hope there's a season 3, and I think that's what's going to be happening with him. But I'm glad that we got this relationship, particularly because I don't know, maybe I'm sentimental or something, but I have enjoyed that dynamic and the idea of seeing Gandalf learn that the little people are valuable. You know, that's a big part of Tolkien's message in the Lord of the Rings too.
yeah,
So
and I don't disagree. I think the chemistry and rapport that the actors had was great, and
yeah,
that the storyline in and of itself showed that wonderful humanity and caring and humility, all of those things that we want to see, as well as the adventurous everyman in over their heads, but rising to the occasion. Like
yeah,
these are all big Tolkienian things, and I have no problem with it. But for me, it comes down to that structural issue that so much of it is siloed, separated,
yeah,
discontiguous from
tangential. Right, yeah,
from everything else, that it didn't feel connected. Now, in the third season, if they start bringing that in, you sort of, well, okay, now it's come in, but we've had 2 seasons of it feeling discontiguous and this whole separate story thread. So again, I would look at it from a structural perspective, and would there have been an easier way to do this or a different way to have worked the character of Gandalf in?
yeah.
Secondly, I am so glad that this mystery box has finally been opened,
Oh, me
revealed,
too.
and done. You know that I dislike mystery box storytelling.
Yeah,
I hated it in season 1. I hated it this season. I hate it in almost everything that I see because the payoff is rarely worth it. And only certain types of narrative work with that kind of storytelling and that
yeah,
technique. There are ones that it does work. This is not that.
yeah,
And again, I'll say, like I said with season one is a lot more enjoyable when you know for a fact it's Sauron from the beginning. And if the showrunners had played with that, if they had written it that the audience knew that it was Sauron from the beginning,
yeah.
you can do a lot more. Think of all of those scenes that we had with Celebrimbor and Anatar, where the audience knows it's Sauron and Celebrimbor doesn't. They were given added weight and drama and tension because you had dramatic irony all the way through.
Right, right.
The same thing could have been done with Gandalf.
I will say, and that, by the way, what you just talked about, that chemistry between those two is, in my opinion, the greatest part of this season. The greatest part of the show so far has been that dynamic between those two. But that aside, because we're going to talk about that,
Mm.
I will say that I'm not disagreeing with you about the whole mystery box part of it. I breathe a sigh of relief as well when finally, oh, thank you. You know, it's Gandalf confirmed. Um, but I do, if the audience had been somehow been able to know that earlier, that would have been better. I agree. But I do like the element of Gandalf having to find himself, so to speak. That this is a part of you have to figure out who you are, your core belief, your values before you can undergo the mission, so to
No,
speak.
but
That part I think was fine.
yeah, but I have no problem with that. It's the fact,
Yeah.
oh, it's the stranger. Oh, what is it? Who is his name? What is his name?
Right.
Oh, like let's tease this bit. You're like,
Yeah, I
oh,
agree with you there.
for the
Yeah.
love of all that is holy in this world, stop
Yeah.
you. It is such a cheap, annoying narrative technique.
Yes, I have to agree with you there. Yeah.
And it
And for
can be.
some reason, they keep doing it, and in these Amazon shows, they did it. They did it in the Wheel of Time as well.
Well,
And it's
to
like,
be honest, I blame J.J. Abrams because he, I think, is a big proponent of this and he's used it in multiple projects he's been involved in, going, this is a great way to hold interest. You go, no, this is a great way to irritate me over and over again. Because by the time you get to the reveal, it is almost certain that the reveal will not be worth it because we will have worked out the three possible main contenders. It'll have been chewed over for weeks. We'll have settled on one. So either we are right and we go, yeah, but we knew that from way back when, or we are wrong and you go, but that's not what this did and this did and this did, and it feels cheap.
yeah,
There is no good way to do this for this type of story. It
yeah,
is so frustrating. But they could have had. He is Gandalf, and he isn't the Gandalf we know because when he comes back, much like when when he comes back after the
yeah,
being killed by the Balrog, it
right,
takes him time to reform who he is and what he is doing and what his purpose is. You could have
yeah,
still done that. I have no problem with that. It's the mystery box element that just bugs me.
yeah. But I do find myself more and more on board with what this show has been doing, which is giving us characters who are not stagnant, who have a journey, like
Mhm.
Galadriel, like Gandalf. These are characters that we know from the Lord of the Rings, and we know what they become. But I appreciate that they're making an effort to show us something different, that this is who they were and how they were pushed on this journey to becoming that. So I do like that in the case of the Gandalf thread as
Yeah.
well.
And again, like the clear contrast between him and the other blue wizard in that oh, I had trusted these people to try and help me find you and they've oh look, they're being evil, so I'll just kill them. And you're like,
Right.
yeah, because that shows that you're not evil, just randomly killing people.
Yeah.
Um so again, like I enjoyed that. I'm looking forward to seeing this story in Rune, even though it is
Yeah.
slightly discontiguous. Um, do I wish that it had almost been its own story? Like,
Like Númenor. Yeah.
yeah, like so many of these, each time again, they're spinning so many plates, and I think removing one of them, as much as I want this Blue Wizard storyline, as much as I want to explore Rune in this
That would be
whole
the
story,
obvious one. Yeah.
that would be the one that I go, you don't need this. We can concentrate more on Numenor and on the elves, and yeah, there's enough there for that. The-
But I will say though, and it's gonna sound weird coming from me because I've been very critical of how disjointed a couple of the episodes were, 3 and 4 particularly, where there just didn't seem I was almost like confused, like what this doesn't it didn't feel good. This episode, as much as it did go from thread to thread, I felt that it was compelling this time.
yeah.
That a lot of stuff was thematically linked, first of all.
Mhm.
Uh, and we've been talking about the themes all along, pride and, ambition. And these things were really well done. And that felt good. But the transitions in this time, in this case, were really, I felt better executed than in those other episodes 3 and 4 particularly. I don't know if you felt that way or not,
Yeah,
but
and for a finale, like they did bring everything together. They tied everything up.
yeah,
And they so if you think the Khazad-dûm storyline, it gets to the sort of the end point of that in a nice, neat place of
yeah,
there's
yeah,
the Balrog in the deep. What is Durin going to do? He has the Dwarven rings. There's stuff going on. So there's more things to be developed, but it's the end of that conflict with his father.
Yeah.
With Eregion, we see the destruction of Eregion.
Right.
That is over. But we have the seed of the foundation of Rivendell. With the Stranger, we finally get rid of the mystery box. It is Gandalf, but
Yeah.
now it's what is this conflict going to be with the Dark Wizard in Rune?
Right.
So again, it's tying up those elements and setting them up for the future.
Yeah. And it's also
Um,
we have to fight Sauron together, you know.
And with Numenor, it's come to the conclusion of the King's men are taking over, the
Yeah.
faithful are being persecuted. So again, it's the conclusion of a thread to set up the next movement. So each time they felt thematically were all tied together, the hubris versus the humility, the personal ambition versus the desire to help others and be a
Yeah.
servant. Like all these things they fit together. For people who say that the writing is bad, one of the issues I have with that as a blanket statement is it is clear there are these really strong, obvious thematic connections. It is
Right.
clear that these arcs are being accumulated. All of these are signifiers of good writing. They are being tied together. We may not like every single instance. There may be instances in which it was clumsy or too overt, and that is fine to talk about. But to say the writing is bad with no discussion of nuance, no recognition of what it is doing well,
Right.
is that overly simplistic and overly reductive. It is either good or bad, as
Right.
if it is either perfect or it sucks. And you're like, narrative is more complicated than that. There can
Right.
be aspects that you can recognize and say, well, actually, that was well done. But on the whole, that is not enough to convince me that on balance, the whole series is good. You go, that is absolutely fine. But people who just have this simplistic notion that the writing is bad, it's frustrating because
Yeah.
there are so many things that are done well. The Celebrimbor and Sauron arc,
Yeah.
this whole season has
It's
been
Greek tragedy.
compelling.
Yeah. Brilliant stuff. The
Um,
acting, the storyline, there is nothing that I can't, and it's also very Tolkienian how it plays out between them, the whole pride and ambition and Celebrimbor's fall, but similar but in a nice different way to Durin Senior's moment where his eyes are opened and he understands everything, and that whole dialogue between him and Sauron, Celebrimbor and Sauron,
but
great stuff.
before we talk about that sequence, and why don't we talk about Numenor? Because
Sure,
again, it's a
slightly
smaller.
more tangential. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So we have the faithful all being arrested.
yeah.
Um, and what's Elendil's daughter called?
Oh,
Arian? Irari. I've
that's
forgotten.
close.
It's something like that. But she's
Elendil's daughter. Yeah.
she's suddenly done
Oops.
there's a wonderful sketch where it's the two guys dressed in the Nazi uniforms and they're sort of in the, and go, hang on a sec, are we the bad guys? And it's the sudden realization she's kind of looking at herself going, hang on a sec, am I one of the bad guys here?
Right.
Uh, so she's suffering from that. But
Yeah.
we have Elendil getting Narsil,
Yes.
the
From Muriel.
famous blade
Yes.
that is going to be passed down along this line. So that was a nice moment for us to go, oh, he's got Narsil.
Narsil. We know what happens to that sword. Yeah, yeah, that was good. And uh, again, leaning into the mythological, which I have enjoyed this season when they do that. That blade being highly symbolic, that is a very symbolic moment. But Muriel is giving Elendil a message here, along with the sword, that I expect you to carry on. I expect you to, continue Numenor as you can, because she has seen the destruction of Numenor through the Palantir. She has seen it. She knows it's coming, but she's going to, like a good captain, stay at her post and let this fall out. But she wants to plant this seed and say, Elendil, you need to go. And here's your sword, buddy. because his sword had been taken from him in the previous episode. So she's trying to tell him, you have to carry on. You're our future here.
Well, he
So
had given up his naval sword, but this
right,
is now he gets a new sword, and it's the famous sword that we know.
right,
And again, it ties into a lot of those mythological stories of like Arthur and the two different
yeah,
magic swords that he had.
yes,
Um,
yeah,
or any of these ones where the hero has the named blade. Like,
right, right,
and it's this sort of signifier of their heroic status. And so this is Elendil being given the sword and then riding off to rally the faithful, but not to try and take over um, Númenor. But this could be the foundation of that Númenorian colony on Middle Earth, which, we see the start of that and then the division between the King's Men and the true Númenorians who are going to be in exile. So that's setting up a lot of really interesting stuff there about the schism has happened and there's now going to be this civil war, this tension between the two sides.
right.
And interestingly, um, we have Muriel being sort of dragged in front of Pharazôn,
Yeah.
and are wedding bells in the air? Is there going to be
I
the
mean,
forced marriage to try and bridge this whole gap that Pharazôn being the uh, well, not really pragmatist, but opportunist
yeah, is
of,
he going to try to legitimize himself by forcing her to marry him? Yeah.
and how many times have we seen that in the historical past of, oh yeah, wait, no, I'll just take them as a wife because that makes me the legitimate king now.
Right.
So I thought that was very interesting, and ending in that whole sequence is setting up that Númenorian um, conflict,
With
which is
him
going to be
riding
very,
off to find Anarion in the West. Yeah.
and we finally get to meet Anarion, who
Yes,
he's
I was wondering about. Yeah.
he's probably been out there, whittling or something,
I
um,
guess. Yeah.
which I suppose takes us to talk a little bit about Pelegir with Kemen and Isildur.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't help it. The actor who plays Isildur, he has one of those faces I just kind of want to slap a little bit. And the only thing that makes him less slappable is that they put him next to Kemen, who is someone who, like,
You want to punch, never mind slap. Yeah. Yeah.
but I felt,
Sniveling Emin.
I felt so bad. Like Isildur, he's fallen in love. He finally has the girl, and then Kemen comes in and being an absolute git, like completely cockblocks him.
Yeah. But also you feel for the man that Isildur is trying to essentially displace, as I can't remember her name, but his
See
love
Estrid?
interest. Estrid, that's right. So Estrid has a fiance, and I feel bad for the dude. I mean, obviously Estrid is like, yeah, he's a nice guy, but when I'm with you, I feel a lot more, I thought I knew what love was, but he's just a nice guy. Poor guy. So he gets his moment where he's kind of like, when Isildur is on the ship leaving, and he's kind of like, yeah,
But
I see you, buddy. Yeah.
you have to I kind of look at this and go, but he realizes now that his future wife doesn't actually love him.
Not
And
the way, not with any kind of passion. No,
yeah, and he was better off finding that out now before they got married.
I suppose.
You're better off finding that sort of thing out before you get married. And go, oh, well, this is awkward.
Yeah,
Um, but again, setting up the sort of almost like dark Numenorian storyline,
right.
where Kemen is instituting forced labor. Uh,
Yes,
and they're going to be cutting down the trees, and we know that the Ents are nearby, and they're not happy with that.
right, right.
So this is all quite interesting, and I think we have the seeds once again sown here. I think Theo really, as the displaced leader of that group, is going to end up, particularly because they keep emphasizing his friendship with Isildur and
Right.
the big hug that they have. I
Theo.
really think they're angling for him to end up being the king of the dead and king of the Oathbreakers.
Right, the Oathbreakers. And also,
Um,
another thing they seem to be angling for, and I like this actually, is the idea that Isildur wants to be heroic. He wants to, in a way that is a little bit, there's some complexity to this character where he wants, in a slightly self-centered way, to be the hero.
Mhm.
And in the way he goes about indulging his desire for Estrid, knowing that she's already betrothed to someone else, also I think is a bit indicative of that part of his character, where he doesn't seem to think, what about this guy out there who's already, do you know what I'm saying? Like there's a bit of
Yeah.
a selfish behavior in Isildur. I hope I don't sound too judgmental or harsh on the guy,
No.
because he's a young guy, but there's that tendency, which obviously has major repercussions later on, right?
And that I think that Arthurian character flaw
Yeah,
is really, really important because
yeah,
Isildur is flawed. Aragorn is the perfection of Isildur.
right,
Isildur is the flawed version of Aragorn.
right,
Um, because Isildur does have a weakness of he succumbs to that temptation.
right,
That and that's important. It has to be there.
right.
And
So I like
showing
that they did that with his character. Yeah.
and it's very Arthurian.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, because again, like that having that flaw at the center of the character, Isildur wasn't perfect. We know that. That's the
Right.
point. And we see like Tolkien play with that with Boromir and Faramir being
Right.
sort of the two sides of the same coin.
Right.
Um, and we can see Isildur and Aragorn being the purer or the one that has been tested and come through on the other side, whereas Isildur was the one who was tested and failed.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
but I think
Good, good
so
stuff.
with Theo being set up, I really do think he's being set up as the King of the Dead and the Oathbreaker.
Interesting. Yeah.
But I
Well,
think
probably right again.
Kemen is being set up as a ring wraith.
I mean, Kemen gets an offer for a ring from Sauron. He's going to be all over that ring. So, yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that he would be a good candidate, I think. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
because he is the absolute worst.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which fair play to the actor. He is really making me loathe him, which
Yes.
meant to do because
Yep. That's what he's supposed to do. Yeah.
he is a sniveling, power-hungry little wretch.
Yeah. Also, I think living in the shadow of his father, you know.
Yeah, because father, for all of his faults, is at least, charismatic.
Right. And competent. Yeah.
Yeah, let's go with that. Um, so do you want to talk about Sauron and Celebrimbor? Because that
Yes.
that
That's my
sequence,
favorite. Yeah. So impressive. Just the acting by both of them. They're both named Charles, I think. Charlie Vickers and Charles something. I can't remember. I shouldn't remember the
Edward.
names, but yeah, whatever it is, they're tremendous actors. They've done a great job with this. And also some real important nods to the Tolkien story in a way that they worked out how they want to do it in this season. Just with that opening, really, with Sauron taking out his. He's a bit miffed about not having his rings, and he's letting Celebrimbor know it very pointedly, isn't he, with those arrows?
Um, and so there were a couple of things that, particularly with that um, iconography that's being used here, the
Yeah,
symbolism of it. First of all, that is very similar to how Tolkien describes Celebrimbor's end.
yeah,
Slightly different, yeah, because yes, but being pierced through with orc arrows. Here he's being pierced through with elven arrows. But the imagery of Saint Sebastian,
right.
very, very reminiscent of that, which is what I think um, Tolkien used as the basis for that imagery.
Sure.
Uh, I thought that was incredibly well done. And if you remember back to earlier on in the season, Galadriel had that vision from her ring of
Yeah.
seeing Celebrimbor pierced through with the shoots of wood.
Yeah.
And it was because she had sown these seeds, and this was the natural fruit that was born from it. We see that this is what has come to pass. So
Yeah.
again, it's this idea of later on when Galadriel talks about the mirror, Galadriel's mirror in the Lord of the Rings, and It can show you what has been, what is, what may come to pass. This is part and parcel of the power of Galadriel.
Yeah.
And we
Yeah.
see that associated with her ring and her character. So I like how, yeah, that was shown earlier on, and it came to pass in a way that we did not quite expect. Like,
Yeah.
so symbolically, the vision at the beginning is clearly linked to what actually happens, but it's not one for one. And that's
Right.
nice. That's how
It's clever.
prophetic dreams work.
It's good. Yeah. Also, they do. Celebrimbor was said to have been made into a battle standard for Sauron, and you kind of get a nod to that with him being shoved up on the pole axe or whatever that weapon is that Sauron is using at the moment to raise up Celebrimbor. So,
It
yeah,
hoist him on his own petard. Um,
yeah,
and one of the things about this, the fact that even at the end, like Celebrimbor has been broken down, but again, he has not succumbed to evil. He has fought his way back, even though he is.
Defiance is brilliant in that moment. He's helpless, but yet still defiant, and he tells it prophetically to Sauron. You are not the master of those rings. You're the slave of those rings.
Of
Brilliant.
one of them in particular.
And one of them in particular is going to be your end. One of them is going to be your demise. Yeah. Uh, I thought that was just epic stuff. Just really good stuff. High
And it,
tragedy.
and a entirely mythological in that whole at the moment of your death you get this prophetic vision, but also
Yeah.
that happens all the time in Tolkien, and so it's both
Yes.
very Tolkienian as well as being very mythological. The
Yeah.
moment before death is when you truly see when the barriers between our world and the metaphysical reality have broken down.
Yeah.
So, like, I really like that being done. And also showing Sauron, again, the weakness of his character, his I'm not getting my way and lashing out, that this is a fundamental flaw of who he is, that it's always about inflicting pain on others and never taking responsibility yourself.
Yep.
And of course, we see that later on when, after he's supplanted Adar. And it's like the orcs are going, oh, but if we do that, and he just stabs him. And you're like, yep, typical bad boss. It's, oh, the
Yeah.
messengers come in with bang. Oh, yeah, just get rid of them.
Yep.
Typical bad boss. But I think,
Also getting rid of a potential leader among the orcs because we've seen that particular orc be a bit of a leader among them, and maybe he's like, yeah, I need to get rid of this guy anyway, and right now I'm peeved, so boom.
yeah. So before we talk about any of the rest of that with Sauron and the orcs, Galadriel and Adar, again, this was a scene I absolutely loved.
Brilliant stuff. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
the power of the elven rings to heal, to restore, to bring back balance, to preserve. This is well established about these elven rings, in
Yeah.
particular Galadriel's ring.
Yeah.
And with Adar wearing it and the corruption and torture being wiped away,
Temporarily at least.
well,
Yeah.
while he is wearing it,
Yeah.
what I actually would have liked to have seen would be even when he took the ring off, that it had cured him. I would have preferred for it to remain because that's the power of the ring to restore.
I can agree with that. But
But showing that he could revert to the elven form
yeah.
and be more clear-headed, that now he's been freed from the pain, obviously, that he has been endured, that this
Mm.
trauma, he's still aware of it, but it's no longer dictating his actions. And we see the truth of what he wanted to do. He wanted the orcs to have their place so that this healing could be there for them.
Yeah.
And we suddenly see an alternate version of what the future of Middle Earth could have been had the orcs been healed.
Yeah. I mean, it was powerful, and again, Adar is not a perfect individual by any means, but I do find him to be compelling and complex. And he seems to me very sincere in his final moments, where he wants to make this pact with Galadriel, and he gives her back the ring. If he had been just a mustache twirling evil villain, he wouldn't be giving that ring back, right? and the strength of character he shows to do that, is yeah, maybe he's a bit of an egomaniac and thinking that he's the one that's going to accomplish all this. He's going to be Sauron. But I do not question that he believes his genuineness in wanting to provide a better life for his children, right? He feels like a genuine, he wants to set himself up as maybe a patriarch, but a benevolent one from his perspective. And he has been wronged, and we see the visual sign of those wrongs. There are scars on his body, on his face. So he's a character that I find compellingly interesting and complex, and I feel for at moments, even as he's a villain. And boy, did he get surprised there when he didn't expect his children to be won over by Sauron like that.
And that's it's the issue is that the external corruption is removed. Morgoth's corruption is temporarily removed from him.
Right.
He is still who he is, and and we have a wonderful moment. His recognition of that, of like, no, Adar is the name I have earned. He doesn't turn his back on what he became,
Yeah.
but Morgoth's corruption of him has been removed. And if he can then, you can see his plan then, if he can remove that corruption, Morgoth's corruption from the orcs, they will be their own people.
Yeah.
And this goes to that very central question that Tolkien had about the orcs. If they came from this,
Right.
could they ever be redeemed? And again, one of the central issues at the heart of Tolkien's work is the mortals of the series always have the possibility to be redeemed,
Yeah. Yeah.
even after having done terrible, terrible things. And I think seeing Adar's transformation, he does not deny what he has done. He does not deny how he has been shaped.
Right.
But Morgoth's external corruption of him, Sauron's corruption of him, that is the thing that's been removed that allows his true form to be seen.
Yeah.
If that could have been applied for the orcs, that's where I think we get this vision. We finally see what Adar's vision for the orcs was,
Yeah.
to become a people just like men, good and bad in all of them.
Right. Right. But not
And
to be
that is
ostracized as inherently evil. Right.
and that is so cruelly ripped away.
Yeah. 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 And then,
Um,
of course, an echo deliberate of the prologue of episode one, where uh, Adar is supposed to crown Sauron, but couldn't figure out which was the up end and which was the down end. And
what was
and
the
he got
problem with those pointy crowns?
pointy crowns are dangerous. So yeah, obviously deliberate echo of what Adar had done to Sauron in the first episode, and you see Adar being slain brutally et tu, Brutus, right? I mean, there's an et tu, Brutus moment for you,
Oh,
sure. Yeah,
and of course, Sauron's appeal to the orcs is basically uh, he's appealing to their bloodlust, their barbarity, because he's seen into them, and that's the thing that he's emphasizing. Whereas Adar wanted to change them, and that was going to be difficult. Redemption is hard. Being barbaric and destroying things is easy.
for
Um,
some people, yeah.
yeah. Um, well, I'm gonna sneeze.
Gesundheit.
Actually, quite painful.
Oh
Um,
yeah, because of your, oh gosh. Yeah. Not recommended after having wisdom teeth extracted. Yeah.
no. Um, so then we have Sauron confronting Galadriel, and this is a whole sequence, and there's a point, one line that Sauron has, and I can't remember his exact words, but where basically Galadriel accuses him of having a plan for everything, and
Yes.
Sauron says, "You think too much of me," because he was um extemporizing. He was what was in front of him, he was manipulating to his advantage each and every time. It wasn't that he had some grand plan of, I'm going to move them here, I'm going to do that. It's like,
Right.
I'm just doing this. Oh, well, this piece is in front of me. I'll manipulate that. I know that they're going to do that at some point, so I'll manipulate this.
Right.
That he worked with what he was given.
He was also able to rely on the flaws of the individuals that he was trying to manipulate, such as Durin Sr., going and having his intentions corrupted by the draw of the power from that ring. It wasn't a specific uh, path laid out by Sauron necessarily, but it was something that he kind of nudged into being. But yeah,
And I think that's one of the things, and it's in one of our favorite book settings in the Malazan Book of the Fallen. Um, there are certain characters who are known for having a contingency of a contingency of a contingency. It's not that they have planned, well, that exact thing was going to happen. They go, well, if that happens, I have this in place. But if that doesn't happen, I have this in place. It's putting things in motion so that you have backup plans and backup plans, rather than I know exactly how everything is going to work out.
yeah,
And I think sometimes when we think of people being these Machiavellian villains who are very difficult to write well, um, their schemes seem so absurdly overly complicated.
right,
And
right,
yet, if we look at it in terms of, well, if that hadn't worked out, this was the next thing he was going to try. And if that hadn't worked out, this was the next thing. That we see it as a whole sequence of fallback plans. Then suddenly you go, yeah, that makes a lot more sense.
right,
And I enjoyed seeing that aspect of it, that Soren's like, no, no, it's not that I had this exact thing planned out,
right.
but I knew roughly what I could push here and there to achieve results I wanted.
And that is quite an encounter between him and Galadriel, where he changes form at a certain point where she's about to, and then he goes back to being, what was his name in the
Halbrand.
Halbrand? He goes back to being Halbrand, and suddenly she's like, "Oh man, I thought I got over that," and he's kind of manipulating her again, and using these different forms, including her own self, right? Again, indicating that Galadriel's journey has been from someone who is very, in some ways, self-absorbed. Like, I'm going to do this by myself. I'm going to beat this. I'm going to beat Sauron. I'm going to avenge my brother. I'm going to, and this has been the problem for the Noldor from the beginning, right? You had the toppling of the statue of Feanor in this episode, very symbolic, right? So Galadriel's encounter with Sauron, I thought, was done quite well. There was a physical level here. There was also a psychological level, but also I would say a mythological level to this encounter that I quite enjoyed.
Yeah, and that, uh facing visions is a typical sort of challenge for a hero in a myth.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
then ultimately one of those visions is almost always themselves.
right.
And
Luke Skywalker finding in the mask of Darth Vader and then seeing that it's his own face underneath it. Yeah, yeah,
of course, like, one of the things that I liked here is it's clear that Sauron has the upper hand, but Galadriel is not as easy an opponent as I think Sauron anticipated.
agreed. Yeah,
And again, the constant temptation of Galadriel, you know, to be this queen, and like, she refuses it, but there's clearly a desire for it. And then in the Lord of the Rings, when Frodo offers the ring, she again sees that temptation and that lure. Like, this is part and parcel of her character.
yeah,
But she has again the strength in the Lord of the Rings to refuse the ring.
right.
So this is not outside of her character. Um, and then that moment of taking off the ring and holding it out, and then her last of the Mohicans, stepping off the cliff.
Yeah,
Um, there's a lot of falling off cliffs in this show.
yep,
It's happened more than once.
yeah.
Maybe they should fight on ground level because there's a lot of these cliffs. But luckily she still had the ring when she hit the ground, and it probably saved her life.
Probably. And then a couple other rings had to be brought to bear and then, well, we could go to that, I suppose, is Elrond using the ring and changing his mind, so to speak, in order to save his friend.
Well, a little bit before that, we had when Elrond and Gil-galad are being led through Eregion while the orcs
Yes.
are destroying it. And Gil-galad turns his ring to
Uh-huh.
face inward so it's not as obvious to the orcs. And
Right.
I thought it was just this little thing he does in the background, which I thought was quite clever.
Nice
But
moment there. Yeah.
I
And then
love
same for the dwarves. I guess we should mention the dwarves actually do show up. Yeah.
in the nick of time.
Yeah, a little late, but better late than never.
well, in the nick of time to save them, but not in the nick of time to save the city. Uh,
Right. True.
um, but Elrond trying to tell the orcs not to burn the scrolls. Like
Yes. Yes. I
the,
mean, when you consider what he makes Rivendell into, he's replacing all that lost as much as he can. I mean, it's a tragedy what all the knowledge of Celebrimbor has been lost, but Rivendell becomes a kind of echo, I guess, of it in a
yeah,
way.
but that I think the burning of books, the burning of scrolls, the burning of knowledge like that, the burning of history and tradition, and
Yeah. Yeah.
that is so symbolic of the very worst of the human condition.
Yeah. And
Um,
Elrond is a preserver. He is a preserver, if anything, right? That's his role.
and so to be perfect, while some people might think it's a little cliche to show the burning of these things,
Uh-huh.
of all of the cliches to show villainy, that one actually, I think, communicates true villainy. Whereas the Sauron killing the orc, I don't like what you said. That the big evil guy killing a messenger because they're the big evil guy just always annoys me because it's a very cheap thing to do. But the burning of books and knowledge and history wounds my soul. Like
Spoken like a true bibliophile, AP.
that, it I look at that and I go, but you you cannot replace that.
Right. Right.
That's thousands of lives, thousands of thoughts and people's creativity just destroyed in an instant. And it shows the difference between the effort it takes to create and the effort it takes to destroy.
True.
So that you have imagery from World War II. You have the burning of the Library of Alexandria. You have all of it. Anytime somewhere is sacked, the raiding of Lindisfarne. Um,
True.
that destruction of knowledge and history and of art and of beauty and of literature, that goes to how depraved the orcs are under
Yeah.
Sauron.
Agreed. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, so we have the dwarves arrive in the nick of time to save their friends, although Durin isn't there. Um,
He's in mourning. Yeah.
and Elrond, I think, because we saw Elrond being very broken, the fact that Durin didn't arrive.
Right.
And now Elrond realizes there are other things going on in the world.
Yeah.
And I think he will feel slightly badly about how he misjudged his friend.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
But it was nice seeing the dwarves turn up and
Yeah.
um, yeah,
I mean, it was cool combat, but yeah,
yeah,
there's,
lots of crossbows instead of the elven archers.
yeah.
Yeah. Which it's fine. It's not a cliche about a lot of dwarves in games that they are more mechanical, so they have the
Right.
crossbows, whereas elves will be the elven archers with their longbows, and you're like, yeah, whatever.
Right.
Um, but Gil-galad and Elrond putting on the ring
Right.
to
Glad you
try and heal Galadriel, and again giving the ring up. And
pivotal moment. I mean, it's a season climax, and it's a moment that's handled well, given everything they set up previously between them about this ring, especially, right?
and what I find astounding is each time someone who is willing to give up the ring. We
Yeah.
saw Galadriel was willing to give her ring to Elrond,
Yep.
and Elrond mistook that as, "Oh, you're just trying to save the ring." And it's like, no, I'm giving the ring back to the elves, so they don't have it.
Right.
Each time we see people willing to give up the Durin at the end giving up the ring,
Yep.
Elrond taking off the ring and giving it to Galadriel. That
Right.
this ability to give up the power when asked is one of these signifiers that I think is playing all the way through and linking a lot of these characters and a lot of these moments. And it goes to strength of character. Whereas we see Sauron's obsession with the rings. He cannot give them up.
Yeah. He gets a little angry when he's missing his ring. Yeah, or rings.
Um, so I thought that was actually very well handled, and it is something that is all the way through, and it is something that links a lot of these different stories. And even then, like to go back to the Gandalf storyline, instead of chasing power, instead of chasing that personal ambition, it's no, I won't go after the power. I will do the right thing for my friends.
Right.
And so we see that willing to be a servant, the willing to give up personal power. This is what's linking a lot of the good characters. And in the end, Adar, for all that he had done, had that moment of
Had
redemption.
it. He had it.
And
He
again,
gets it for ring too. Yeah.
he comes to a tragic end. So we have that the tragic fall. Um, like, and the fact that it happens so consistently throughout, that we see all of these connections, that they are happening all the time. This is why when people, and again, I'll go back to this point, that's a sign of good writing. Or do you
Yeah.
think it just accidentally happened multiple times? That they just coincidentally had these themes and these connections that fit with established narrative patterns and tied it all together at the exact moment when we're tying up threads. Oh, what a startling coincidence.
No, I am very pleased with this finale and with this season in general. I did have my criticisms that I voiced, especially of episodes 3 and 4, but I feel like they picked it back up again with episode 5. And from there on, I think there's been some solid and even excellent storytelling. And they've never faltered with the visuals and the music and
Yeah.
the acting, but the storytelling really has ended on such a strong note here at the end of the season.
And then I would agree. I think costuming, special effects, the
Yeah,
visuals, the sound effects, the soundtracks, a lot of the acting, like that stuff has all been great. Storytelling, there was there were parts and sections of season one that I really enjoyed and thought were great,
sure.
but I thought it had a lot of flaws. And I still think that this season still has its flaws. And I think those flaws are still foundational in what they have chosen to do.
Right,
But given that there's no point to constantly go, well, yeah, and then that's bad. You're like, yeah, I've identified it. Moving on. What are they doing with the thing?
right.
And I actually think how all of the different storylines tied up in this episode, this is improving each season. They are getting more confident with what they're doing. They're getting more controlled with what they are doing. Are
Agreed.
there still bum notes? Are there still bits and pieces that I don't like? Yeah, it's a TV show. Like any TV show or any film or any novel, there's going to be moments in it that I go, eh. But I think on balance, this season is much stronger than season one.
Totally agree. Yeah,
And not only that, I think as the different threads are converging, as they're becoming more confident in what they're doing, I think it's going to become even more cohesive. I see this building towards something as opposed to them flailing and not having a direction. I think there's a very strong direction in this. And given the strong thematic focus all the way through this season, and how it ends with the establishment of Rivendell. It ends with this decision to fight for the light. It
yes.
it ends with all of these symbolic resonances. It's clear they know what they are doing. They do have a plan. Is that plan one that I 100% agree with? No. But then again, I'm grumpy. I very rarely agree 100% with anyone. But you can see the strengths of it. You can see the connections between the Galadriel here and the Galadriel we know. We see these arcs. We see Elrond growing into the leader we know he becomes.
Yep.
Um, we see Durin being faced with the destruction of Moria, and it's not just all immediately over. Like Moria is Khazad-dûm is going to continue into next season because the Balrog isn't rampaging all the way through. So there's
Right.
more to be done there, which is going to be interesting. Uh,
Definitely.
and now what I'm curious with. And of course, I'm getting my Blue Wizard story in Rune, which is the story I really wanted. Now I no longer have that annoying mystery box of
Yeah.
Gandalf. I can actually just enjoy the story. And while I know that you enjoy The Hobbit, and like I said, I agree with you on some aspects of it.
Yeah.
If next season there are no hobbits whatsoever, I'd I'd be perfectly happy.
You won't get that one, I think. There will be hobbits. There will be hobbits.
So overall, I think this season, much like Wheel of Time season two, I think there is a marked improvement
That's true. Yeah.
that the showrunners, the writers, the actors, everyone I think is getting more confident in what they are doing and doing a better job because of it. And yeah, season one, not perfect of either this or Wheel of Time. But
No.
season two, again, not perfect, but getting a lot better.
Yeah. And compelling, really compelling in many aspects. So yeah. I enjoyed
Yeah.
this. I'm glad we watched it and that we've had this discussion series. And I think there are a few people out there who've appreciated having a couple people talk about the show and actually analyze it and not
So,
just dismiss it out of hand, right?
but one of the really weird things is like, there have been a couple of comments that we've gotten where people have been annoyed that we haven't liked it enough. And then there are other comments that we get where people are annoyed that we don't hit it. And you're like,
That's when you know you're in the probably in the right place,
it's we're shills and liars because we say we like this thing,
right?
when clearly we there's no possible way that we could. But we're
Yeah,
also we're not giving it a chance because we disliked something. You know,
right.
ah. All I can ever do is say what I think about the stuff and my reasons for it. Um,
That's all we
but
can do.
Philip, thank you so much for having these conversations with me. It's been a lot of fun, and it's made watching the series even more enjoyable because I enjoy talking about this stuff. So thank you.
Yes, I have looked forward to every conversation as always. So thank you, my friend. Thank you to the viewers who put up with us and our silly occasional silliness. And yeah, I'm looking forward to a season three if we get one.
Okay. And for those of you still watching, thank you very much for watching. Thank you for your continued support, and I'll see you in the next one.